ripples and so on. Then there's a couple of meters, 2 or 3 meters of this stuff here. Should look something like that, with lots of little ripple marks in it, mud, placer beds, lenticular beds. There's a sandstone unit in here, which is that one about halfway up the cliff. Should look something like that. Then there's a mudstone unit underneath that. It's that dark coloured one in the middle. And then there's the bit down where we're standing on this surface down here. And so we should have a little bit of another coarse-grained unit, which is the one that you're standing on there. And then underneath, we should have this material down here. Okay, we want to move on a bit, so otherwise we discuss it a little bit more. But there's some of the stuff here is pretty good. So in the fine-grained, interbedded, placer, lenticular bedded material, did everybody see the syneresis or shrinkage cracks? Who didn't see them? So if you didn't see them at the end, I'll point them out to you. So there's some characteristic syneresis cracks in there. They indicate fluctuating salinity. And they're underwater shrinkage where you get fresh water and salt water alternating. Did everybody see the ripple marks that migrate in multiple directions, backwards and forwards? So bidirectional ripple marks. These things are indicative of estuarine conditions with fluctuating salinities and tides that go in and out. The coarse grain unit that sits at the bottom of the estuary up there, this unit here, is coarse grain, and it's got crossbeds in it that all point from right to left, going like this. What direction are they migrating in approximately? North, south, east, west? West, okay? In the Permian Basin that Bill talked about this morning, which way's the ocean? If we're standing on the shoreline in the Permian, which way's the ocean then? Which direction? North, south, east or west?
Southeast. You had some paleogeographic maps in the front of your booklet.
Now this is all good stuff to think about. The Permian wasn't much different to now. Mountains were to the west, ocean was to the east, and whoever said southeast probably looked at their maps, but it's a little bit southeastish. So if we're here in the Permian and we looked out there, we'd see ocean. We look back up there, we'd see mountains. We look that way, we'd see the coastline. We look that way, we'd see the coastline. What direction then are the bed forms migrating on the bottom of that estuarine channel up there? Landward or seaward? Landward. So they're probably tidal currents, okay, because the flow is going towards the land. And all these things up here are day-to-day fluctuations in the tidal currents going backwards and forwards, with little ripples migrating that way on the flooding tide and that way on the ebbing tide. Looking closer still, you can see that there's alternation. Sometimes it's muddy, sometimes it's sandy. Sometimes it's muddy, sometimes it's sandy. What would give us an idea that what caused the alternation in energy between mostly sandy ripples migrating backwards and forwards and mostly muddy ones migrating backwards and forwards?
So you can see it rainy environment.
It could be seasonal, but it's not that long. Stormy it could be too, but we're in a fairly quiet environment here in the estuary, so yeah, it's the alternations between tides are the most likely explanation. What alternates in the tide that might cause it to be high energy versus low energy? Spring and neap. Okay, so these things are probably neap spring cycles in the estuary. Okay? These are the bottoms of the estuarine channels here. And so this stuff is reasonably good to interpret at this location. The syneresis cracks indicate fresh versus salty water. The tidal currents going backwards and forwards. The bottom of the channel. The indications of the muddy. So it's probably something like Throsby Creek in Newcastle. I told people about that before and they said, where the hell's Throsby Creek? Well, if you go across the Carrington Bridge to Carrington, that's Throsby Creek. This, if we took a core or we were able to see what was in the bottom of Throsby Creek, it'd look like that. Or Dora Creek or Cockle Creek or any of those ones flowing into Lake Macquarie. This stuff is way out in the ocean, fine grain, marine, mudstone. So what's going to happen if we go from fine grain marine mudstone into a tidal change? The depths change. Here we're in, I don't know, 50 metres of water. Here we're in 2 metres of water. So the shoreline has to have moved to get from here to here. Did the shoreline move landward or seaward?
Seaward.
Well, to get from this stuff to that stuff, did the shoreline move landward or seaward?
Landward.
Seaward.
Or the shoreline moves seaward, okay? Because this is Throsby Creek, this is somewhere out on the continental shelf. So you had to move Throsby Creek out and sit it on top of the continental shelf. So here we are in this estuarine channel. What happened when we got to here? This is 2 or 3 metres deep. We said this might be 25 metres deep. So what happened across this boundary to get us from here to here? Did the shoreline move seaward or landward? Landward, right? Because this is sea, this is land. Sea above land, it moves land. This is a transgression. This is a regression. So the boundaries that you saw in this section are actually boundaries caused by the shoreline migrating backwards and forwards. Maybe 10 kilometres, 20 kilometres each time. Each time it passes through, it creates a surface. And so you go from deep water mudstone to shallow water estuary to the continental shelf. And by doing it, you generate that boundary. This facies above it, that facies below it, another boundary, another facies. So that's pretty much the interpretation of what we get here. To save some time, the stuff that you're all standing on down there is going to be present around the next bend. And so we're going to walk across this platform here and get around to the next section, and then we're going to be able to measure down from there the next, I don't know, 5 or 10 metres or whatever.
There's some things to look at on the way to the corner. I'll stop. There's some particular features in the sequence which you don't see too many places.